Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 266, cover dated late August 1990. So obviously this is the one that features the first appearance of Gambit, and he's front and center on the cover here with a young or de-aged Storm. And also in the corner box up here, and drawn there by Jim Lee. So Jim Lee is the co-creator of Gambit, not the artist here for his first appearance in the interior of the book. But what you see here is an incongruity in terms of the two designs. So this is ultimately the final design for Gambit's costume, but what he's wearing here on the cover by Andy Kubert, penciled and inked by Andy Kubert, is actually based on one of Lee's early alternate designs, and I'm going to show you that now. Just put this to one side for the moment. And in the back of the epic X-Men collection, Dissolution and Rebirth, there are a few pages that show us Lee's designs for Gambit. So here we have exactly the costume there that was drawn by Andy Kubert, and also you can see Lee's design for Storm and what she's wearing, and Kubert has basically copied this for his cover. And also in this, in the back matter of this book, we also see some of Lee's workings for designing costumes for Gambit. This here looks a lot like what he'd go with for Spartan for Wildcats. This is a little closer to what he ultimately went with. So just interesting to see these designs, and also the headshot there, and Gambit's eyes as well, where they're mostly black with these red pupils. So let's go back now to the issue itself, and let's open it up. So this is following on from the cliffhanger at the end of 265, and our title now is Gambit, Out of the Frying Pan. And so Storm, de-aged Storm, has been trapped by the Shadow King and is being attacked by these hounds. And in the previous issue, the hounds didn't have these spikes on their costumes. But now they do, and this recalls the hound costume that Rachel Summers, Phoenix, used to wear, in particular this red one here. So there's kind of an intimation of some kind of connection between the Shadow King and the kind of hound that Rachel was. But the creative team here for this significant issue is Chris Claremont as ever, writer, Mike Collins returning as guest penciler, Joseph Rubinstein inking, and then we've got two letterers, Pat Brousseau and Tom Orzechowski, the regular series letterer, and then Brad Van Kanta, guest colorist. So these hounds go into attack Storm, and here we have the Shadow King watching on malevolently from the sidelines. Just open that out for you a bit better. And interesting to see Mike Collins here using, or Rubinstein using, a little bit of duo shade here. So a little bit of time taken over the drawing of this issue. I think the art here is quite fine, as I did with Collins' previous guest stint. It's very capable. You can see here the design work on this big bathroom, even as Aurora is fleeing the hounds and attacked by the Shadow King. She has time to think, blessed mother, I've seen smaller houses than this big bathroom of the rich guy whose house it is. So this is quite an attempt by her to get free of the pursuing hounds, and ultimately she manages to get past the Shadow King too. He isn't able to get a grip on her psychically here, so we see she's able to resist his powers, and that's interesting as regards why that might be, because the Shadow King believes that that she is no match for him, but she proves to be, and she's able here in this panel to use her mutant power and strike him with a lightning blast that burns his face and disfigures him temporarily. And then she falls off this balcony here into an inside pool in this huge house. And here we have it, the arrival of Gambit. First of all, we see him from behind with his armored boots coming towards her as Storm is creating a fog to cover her escape from the Shadow King and his hounds and Lian Shen. So he uses his powers to restore his face from having been burnt by Storm. And then, of course, he sends his hounds back after Storm once again. And we have this little interlude scene with Nanny and the Orphan Maker, where Nanny has discovered in the previous issue Storm's location in Cairo. And it turns out that Nanny has knowledge of the Shadow King. And as she says here, merciful heavens, no, it can't be. A mutant signature I haven't seen for years and prayed never to see again. I thought Hope prayed he was dead. More fool I. How can the devil incarnate die? And there is something devilish and demonic about the Shadow King as he's being portrayed and represented in these issues. His power to corrupt body and soul, his victims. And so here we have Nanny showing Orphan Maker what will happen if they don't rescue Storm from the Shadow King, how he'll turn her into one of his hounds. And Orphan Maker gets confused by the holographic projection and tries to fight it, but of course he's wrong. So Nanny concludes by saying she and everyone else is in big trouble unless they can save Storm. So back at the mansion then, here we have Gambit, first full view of him with his trench coat and armor and smoking a cigarette. So definitely a 1990s comic before Joe Quesada demanded that nobody smoke in Marvel Comics. And here he is reviewing coolly the art in the house and ignoring Storm at this point until the hounds arrive. And he tells her a 10-day share, watch the door, so watch out. So he is aware of her, but he's focused on the artwork, which he is there to steal. And so there is a sense in which it's pure coincidence that Gambit runs into Storm, that it wasn't planned, that it's happenstance. And then we get some insights into his powers. So we see this weird flash of energy from his eyes, a little bit of duo shade there from Collins and Rubinstein. And then he pulls out a throwing spike and very fluidly pulls his arm back and throws it. And the throwing spike has obviously been charged with some kind of energy, and it explodes, this greenish looking energy with the force of a cannon shell. So it stuns the hounds. And then he manages to catch Aurora, and she tells him, I'm called Storm. And he gives her a kind of like a nickname, Stormy, which he doesn't like. So then he has to make a decision whether to rescue her or take the art, a fortune in classical art. He says, paintings will keep. Us thieves, we have to stick together. So how does he know that she was a thief too? Because she hadn't a chance to get to the artwork before she was attacked by the hounds. So that's interesting. And then he continues and says, Sides, I'm intrigued. If you're who I think you are, I'd like to find out how you got so good so young. So what does Gambit know about Storm? Is he aware of or familiar with her adult self? And then he runs into Lian, Shen, and two hounds. And now we get another interesting insight into Gambit and his powers, whereby he starts to charm her and says, don't need to be told. He throws Ororo onto a seat. Don't need to be told. Just stepped way out of my league. No prob, no offense. Practical man knows his limitations, minds his own business, realizes when the time comes to cut his losses. Want the girl? Yours with my compliments. Take the art too. And then Ororo thinks he talks and talks and they listen, almost as though they cannot help themselves, as he binds them with his web of words. Even the hounds are charmed. So this is a point at which Gambit's powers are not precisely defined, and it may be that there was an idea that he would have a secondary power, some kind of power to charm, but ultimately, of course, what was decided was he's just a charming, seductive guy, and this is just ordinary techniques of persuasion and seduction by Gambit. But interesting to see the body language where he's all smiling and he has his hands out open to show that he's no threat, and it works on Leanne and the hounds, but not the Shadow King, who is able somewhat to get into Gambit's head. And the Shadow King says to him, "Very snappy patter, my young friend. I dare say, given a decent opportunity, you might seduce even me. Once you've undergone a proper, albeit painful reorientation, that's a talent I can put to some considerable use." But Ororo steps in to save Gambit, but her lightning strike doesn't work. So the Shadow King attacks her psychically again, but he's not able to fully control her psychically. So Gambit takes advantage of the diversion and charges up this plate and sends it back up at the Shadow King on the balcony, which explodes the balcony. Then Leanne gets the advantage of him, and she's annoyed at how he charmed her, and says, "So many pretty words you spoke, but far worse the hints dropped, promises made without words. That wasn't nice. I enjoy temptation. Now more than ever I dreamed," because the Shadow King has brought out her wicked shadow side, "but I won't be trifled with." So again, this is a little insight here into the fact that Gambit's powers of seduction are sensual in nature, that he was trying to seduce Leanne Shen sexually, not just in terms of a sales patter. And that's an interesting addition to the X mythos, but going all the way back to some themes that that Claremont has played around with since Mastermind's original manipulation of Jean Grey, that brought out her dark, sexy side as well. But interesting to see all of that getting rolled into the characterization of Gambit here in his first appearance. So then what happens is that Storm uses her powers to send soot billowing into the room from the hearth, and Gambit and Storm together make an exit with the soot covering their escape. So Gambit once again uses his power to blast the balcony on which the Shadow King and some of the hounds are standing, and then they make their way out of the house back up onto the roof of the house, and Storm uses her power to fill a parachute with wind, and then they manage to get off the roof, with the hounds just missing them as they depart. So where do they go to? Yes, so the narrative caption makes the point a while later, some distance away. This is the airplane graveyard that Storm has made her home, temporary home in, while she's living in Cairo. And we have this little bit of dialogue between them where Gambit says he saw cop cars coming as they lifted off because he made a phone call to the cops. The wind's dying, we're floating down just like a chute's supposed to, so I figure it's okay to chat, yes? TV trucks too, share. Should be quite a media circus, shame to miss it. Keep the bad guys off our trail for the immediate. Nice neighborhood. This where you call home, Stormy? So Gambit's very talkative, asking lots of questions, and she responds annoyed. You know, I told you she doesn't want to be called Stormy, but he says the name fits. Hang loose, I get you. And she is determined that she doesn't need any help, especially from the likes of him. And so there's a little bit of a standoff between them. And then we have this arrangement from Storm, where she says, "From here, Gambit, we start fresh." And he responds as he lights up one of his cigarettes, "Suits me. Trouble is," he says, "I get the feeling it won't be quite so easy to walk away clean from this caper as you make out. No, it will not. The evil one neither forgets nor forgives." So really what they decide is to team up. Ultimately, it's not explicit here, where she explains about the Shadow King and how he has a special hatred for her. And she says, "The hounds have tasted my blood and the Shadow King my thoughts. I take it that's a yes. And if they catch you, what will he do then? Whatever he pleases, to me, to all who stand by my side." So really the implication is it's whether, or the suggestion is that, or the opening is rather, whether Gambit will stick with her or not. But it turns out he does in the next issue. And then we have this interesting cutaway to Washington, D.C. again. And last time we had a scene set in Washington, D.C. We saw Val Cooper. And it turns out that Val has gone to a slightly seedy townhouse by some federal land hard by Rock Creek Park. And inside there is someone sitting before a fire. And so we know it's Val from the readout here. She's using her security pass to enter. This house is the headquarters for the government's Enhanced Powers Strike Team Freedom Force. And Val is under the control of the Shadow King, and he sent her to kill Mystique. So Mystique here is looking at a picture of her with a younger version of Destiny, Irene Adler. And also we see some handwritten notes here as well, which will be explained later on. So obviously Mystique is long-lived with this version, a younger version of Irene in the picture. Val enters the house, and this is a nice page, I think, from Mike Collins, showing Mystique grieving for Irene, and turning into the young version of Irene before that turns into the older version, the one who died back in Uncanny X-Men 255. Just as in these slender vertical panels, Val enters and pulls a gun, but Mystique has been expecting her. Right on time, Val, precisely as expected. Just a note here, where are Mystique's legs? We've got the legs of the chair, but Mystique's legs are missing from that drawing. And then we have this climax denouement where Mystique says, "One of the curses of being a precog, and make no mistake, Destiny was one of the best, has to be the awareness of your own mortality, of sensing in all the possible alternatives, all the moments and manners of your own death. Yet Destiny did nothing to prevent it. She willingly chose and embraced her fate. I suppose I can do no less, because that knowledge was no bar to her while still alive, foreseeing what lay ahead for those she loved, including the moment, Val Cooper, when you'd come to kill me." So Mystique is aware of it. Val has got her in her sights, and then the final panel is blam, so gunshot. And we would infer that Val shoots Mystique, but we're going to have to keep reading to find out exactly what happened at the conclusion of this scene. So there you have it, the first appearance of Gambit, Uncanny X-Men 266. His visuals designed by Jim Lee, but interesting that Lee didn't draw the first appearance. Bit of a missed opportunity there, I think, but obviously It just wasn't possible. But he does turn up next issue, Uncanny X-Men 267, to pencil in that famous Jam issue that he and Homage Studios turned around in a week, the second appearance of Gambit. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.